Shalom, can you hear me? Shalom, can you hear me? This is Bill Bullock, and I'm trying to get back with you and give you one more little issue of discussion while I've got you before I am unavailable for a while. So this is about what's going to take place next week. I've kind of mentioned it in the previous session that I just did about Parsha Nitzavim. This discussion that we'll have today is about what the world knows, or men have chosen to call Rosh Hashanah. It is known biblically as the first day of the seventh month of the biblical year, and it is called in Hebrew Yom Teruah. The words Ruah is the source, and so you're going to find that from a Hebrew standpoint, we never just make stuff up. Whenever we try to figure out what this day is going to be about, we always go back to the first usage or a illustrative usage of that key word in the Torah. So Ruah is the key. Teruah, your Ruah, whatever the Ruah is. We'll talk about that. Your Ruah, we have one. It is a cry, it is a shout, it is a response to a stimulus of in this case, of the heaven. Your Ruah, and this is drawn from Genesis chapter 3. And with the discussion of after the ingestion of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the Holy One came into the garden in physical manifestation form in a way in which his presence could be felt. Meanwhile, Adam and Hava had gone into the woods. They had found a place where they could hide behind trees. They had also cut or put together fig leaves in some way that they covered what they considered their nakedness after they had been exposed to the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the Holy One comes to him and he begins to seek Adam. And he seeks Adam and he calls him apparently by name, but he says, Ayika, where are you? Well, then it's incumbent upon Adam to Teruah. As a matter of fact, in the English, we get a real confusion about this, because in the English language, as it's written by the King James authors, they've interpreted a phrase in Hebrew to mean that this all took place in, quote, the cool of the day. In Hebrew, L'ruah, here we go, here's our word, L'ruah, Yom, the time of, and whatever ruah is, of breathing in, taking in a deep breath, and then declaring, expressing, preparing to answer the roll call, to respond to the divine presence. Well, that is what Yom Teruah, Rosh Hashanah, if you want to call it that, is all about. It is about mankind regularly returning in accordance with the calendar and the dating and the instructions of the Holy One, regularly returning to the garden or to the place where the Holy One is visiting, to respond to him, to take in a deep breath, the ruach, and then to breathe out. It's connected obviously with the sound of the shofar, the sound of the human being taking in a deep breath and then blowing out a sound that is discernible by the spirit, not necessarily by the mind or the flesh, that doesn't fit in with the ill issues of skill, of learning keys and how to make all that stuff work in music. It is not a musical note, it is a cry of the soul in response to a divine intervention, a divine question. Ayika, where are you, Adam? Well, we're all Adam. He is the one who is calling us. We are the one who have to put aside our fig leaves, take ourselves out from behind all the religious and philosophical and ideological leaves that we will put onto ourselves to keep us from looking or feeling naked in his presence, and instead go forward into his presence and respond. And let him tell us where he's going to send us, what he's going to have us do, what our purpose will be, and then eventually he'll tell us how he's going to bring us back and what is going to happen at the end of days. The whole story of Genesis is portrayed in this. The rest of Genesis is all about Genesis 3:7 and the idea of after we're sent out from Genesis 3:24 was sent out. There's a mission. All of the story is told in Genesis 3:4 through 50 in this process. Well, this is about Yom Teruah. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about it. Yom Teruah is the day of the piercing cry, the cry of the spirit, the cry of the soul, of responding to the roll call, as it were, the where are you of the Holy One. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. I want to talk to you first of all, make very clear what the observance of the first day of the seventh month of the biblical year, what Yom Teruah is not. Okay? These are some of the things that it is not. First of all, it is not a Jewish tradition. I know theologians and people wise in their own eyes have come with this idea that Rosh Hashanah, Yom Teruah, the first day of the seventh month, is all just Jewish tradition. This has nothing to do with anybody in the rest of the world. No, this has to do with mankind. This is between the Holy One, the Creator of the universe, and mankind. So it is not a Jewish tradition. It is a biblical mandate. It is part of the covenant of the Creator of the universe with those who wish to be in covenant with Him and live the lifestyle that He has called for as a model to the rest of the world. It is a biblical mandate. If you don't believe that, you can just look closely at Leviticus 23 through 25, but I won't take time to read that right now. But it is, and consider that in light of Leviticus 23:2, which says whose special days these are. These are not Israel, Jews' days. These are the Creator's days. So it's part of a great light to the Gentile calling of B'nai Israel. This idea of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Teruah, the special events that we do, things that happen on the first day of the seventh month of the biblical year, not Jewish tradition. Just put that out of your head. It's just wrong. It's just incorrect. It is part of the great light to the Gentiles calling of B'nai Israel. We are to do this. This is part of our mission. Part two, but it's not. Not only is it not a Jewish tradition, it is not a relic of some old covenant that is done away with in Yeshua or modern days technology or modern forms of religion. It is not a relic of some old covenant that's done away with. To the contrary, it is part of what is written on our hearts. If you want to think about a new covenant, understand what that means biblically. Don't just start throwing terms around that you think understand from a Western mindset. A renewed, refreshed covenant that is the old covenant put forth in a different phase of operation, a different phase and level of interpretation and use and application. And that you see is defined. You see how it's clear. That's in Jeremiah 31. 33 through 38, in Hebrews 8, 10 through 12, which quotes Jeremiah 31. This is what it is. The new covenant is the old covenant, but it is put forth in a way in which has different layers of meaning, different layers of impact and interpretation for the world based upon where we are at a given time. So this has not gone away. It cannot go away. It can't be replaced by some other holiday or special day. This is not a holiday. This is a divine appointment, come to respond to the Holy One. And we do it every year in remembrance of what happened in Genesis 3 and in anticipation of what will take place as the Genesis 4 through 50 unfold in our times, in our lives, in our families, in our households, in our late nations, in our ethnicities, in our communities. So it's not a Jewish tradition. It's not a relic of an old covenant that's been done away with by Yeshua or somebody else. It is not a type of anything. The whole issue of type is something that theologians like to talk about. But the issue in Hebrew, it would be a sign. It's a sign, and the sign is like today when I came to work, there was a certain sign that's been put up by the government. It says how many miles it is to Wamba, to the town where this meeting is being broadcast from, near Texarkana. That sign's been there forever. It still tells the same truth. It tells you there's 4 miles from my house, basically, or from the first place I see the sign, to where this building is. So if you understand what I'm saying, but this is not some sort of type that's sort of predisposed to something else. And it's not to be interpreted by people who don't have a clue about the covenant, but people who are elders in the covenant, who understand the covenant. Just imagine that you were called, a Jewish person was called before a pagan king. And the pagan king asked him a question, and the Jewish person answered in a way that made sense to the covenant. But the king realized he was not a party to that. He'd never been a party to that. So he said, bring in an elder. Bring in some of the elders of the Jewish people who can explain to me what this means, what he said means. I know he spoke in interpretation of my language, but he spoke from a different perspective, with a different mindset, with a different purpose, and I need to get all the relevant information before I can make my decisions as to what to do with what he has told me. That's the way it is. It's a sign, not a type. It is not to be preached on theologically by pastors trying to, or preachers, or anybody trying to live a life separate from the Torah covenant, the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the covenant of Sinai, the covenant of the plains of Moab, the covenant that God has ordained for us to follow, and he will keep renewing over and over again in different contexts until he brings it to its culmination at the end of days. So it is a type. It's not a type, no. It is a sign. It is a sign. It is an annual Sabbath for communion with and for accountability to the Holy One, mankind coming as an entity, as we talked about in Parsha Nitzavim. You are all standing. We are all to pass before the rod of inspection on that day. And if you want to understand the passage, the background for that, you might want to read Ezekiel 20, verses 32 through 44, I believe it is, in that process. Now, is Yom Teruah about the past? No. It has past implications to it, like we talked about in the garden. Is it a relic of an old covenant? No. It is a living sign that tells people where they are in relation to where they're trying to go. Is it about the present? Yes, it is. Is it relevant to our modern lives? Yes, it is. Is it about the future? Yes, it is. Does it tell us and awaken us to an important consciousness of a turning point that needs to happen in order to get us to the potential for impact and direction that we're supposed to have? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Does it have something to do with, in fact, is it an essential element of the Holy One's grand, redemptive, and restorative plan? Yes, it is. It is not done away with. It is not something, little game that Jewish people play. It is a part of the covenant that tells what the grand, redemptive, restorative plan is and portrays it in dramatic form to the nations. Does it have something to do with Messiah? Oh, yes, it does. Does it have to do with his come follow me and go therefore commissions? Does it help define what those come follow me and go therefore commissions are? Yes, it does. Does it have something to do with, could it be an essential element of the kingdom of heaven coming to earth, on earth as it is in heaven, coming and doing the will of the Holy One on earth as it is in heaven? Yes, it does. Now, I want to point you to a passage in chapter 4 of Revelation to tell you the correlation here. Behold, the door standing open in heaven, the Revelator writes, John the Revelator. Behold, the door standing open in heaven. What are we going to do? Bring what's in heaven to earth, right? On earth as it is in heaven. Behold, the door standing open in heaven. And the first voice that I heard was like a what? A trumpet, a shofar. This is the sound. This is the cry, the piercing cry of the heart. The first voice I heard was that of a trumpet or a shofar speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I will show you things which must take place after this. You've just heard the essence of Yom Teruah, of Rosh Hashanah. A season of special holiness when we're called to get a better perspective, a higher perspective on what life's all about, what our walk with the Holy One is all about, our relationship with Him is all about, what mission and purpose and destiny we have in this earth, and this life, and in the world to come. It is an opening to a series of scheduled, thematic, betrothal period interactions we're about to have with the Bridegroom of Heaven. Over the course of the 10 days after Yom Teruah, then we'll have, like I say, Yom Kippur, the day of appearing, rehearsing our own death, and appearing before the judgment seat for another year to determine what should be our mission, what should be our focus the next year, a new renewal of the covenant for another coming year. Then we'll have Sukkot, then we'll have the 8th day, the full final culmination day that we celebrate. These are all on the horizon, but it all starts, the open door portal is Yom Teruah, the day of trumpets. Now I'm going to go forward from that passage in Revelation 4 and read a little bit more of what John was saying as he was introducing this, what we're talking about in heaven and bringing it to earth. Immediately he says, I was in the Spirit, the Ruach. I was in this, and behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. Remember, you all appearing before the presence and the face of the Holy One your God from Mitzavim? A throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne, and he who sat there was like a jasper and a sardius stone in appearance. And there was a rainbow around the throne, in appearance like an emerald, And around the throne were 24 thrones. And on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes. Do you get the scenery? And they had crowns of gold on their heads. And from the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices. Do you remember the Sinaitic trumpet that was heard at that time, and how this all sounded like lightnings and thunderings? And it goes on. It's later in the chapter. It says, "And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals." All the fullness of what this scroll of the Torah means. "Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy?'" Well, we know who is worthy. We know Yeshua did not do away with the scroll. He did not change the scroll. Yeshua came to show us the next phase, the higher phases, the highest levels of applications of what's in the scroll to our lives. Hallelujah and amen. Well, we're going to talk about Yom Teruah as a day in the courts of the Holy One, a day when we're called up into his courts and the thrones are set, and he is the one at the center of it all, the main feature. And we're in his presence, and we sense the power and the holiness, the energy that emanates from his presence. And he begins to wash over us and draw us closer, even though we cannot come. We don't think. Only through covenant can we come. And so I want to recite to you from Psalm 84, the verse that says, "My soul longs, yes, even faints, for the courts of the Holy One." Yom Teruah, coming into his presence on this day, appearing before the throne, is not a burden, a job we have to do, an unpleasant interruption of our daily activities. Oh, my soul longs, even faints, for the courts of the Holy One. This is what I live for, is to be in your courts. One thing I desire, one thing I will seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Holy One forever and gaze upon his beauty and inquire and investigate things, the wisdom of his temple. For my soul longs, even faints, for the courts of the Holy One. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. It is with this level of anticipation that I encourage you to approach Yom Teruah, Rosh Hashanah, and approach the days of awe, and approach the Yom Kippur, and approach Sukkot, and approach Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day that we talk about. All right, in Leviticus 23, verse 2, the Holy One says that these are, what are these things? These things that will include Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shemini Atzeret. They're going to be listed in Leviticus 23. But he says in chapter 23, verse 2, "These are my appointed days." Feast, I think the English Bible reads. "These are my assigned moedim, my special occasions, signpost of where you are and where you're going. My signs that tell you where you need to go and what direction you're headed. These are my feasts. They're not Jews' feasts." Oh, the voice of the Creator of the universe speaks in Leviticus 23. It should be in red in your Bibles. These are my feasts, the things he's going to talk about: Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, etc. The Holy One doesn't use the English. He didn't speak in English. English was not even invented, and he wouldn't have used it anyway, because it's not the kind of language that communicates revelation. English only communicates scientific, historic, literary information. It is not a good medium for spiritual revelation. So the Holy One used the Hebrew language. He chose that specifically to use, and he still prefers that as a method of communicating spirituality. So we talk about the Hebrew a lot, because the Hebrew is the essence to go beyond the thinking of our brains and the functioning of our minds and how it fits into our frame of reference of things we've learned from other places. It goes beyond all that to the deep communication, spirit to spirit, of the Creator of the universe and the neshama that he has created and breathed into us, the life force he breathed into us. So instead of saying feast, the Hebrew, what the Holy One really said, I should say, is moedim, my moedim, the appointed times, the times of witness, times of testimony of truths. Moed is the word that is the singular form. Moedim is the plural. It's derived from a verb ya'ad, which means to set a specific date, time, and place, and agenda, and a script for an important meeting. In other words, we have a time, and not only do we have a specific date, we're supposed to go and we're supposed to recite certain things, say certain things. Like last week in Torah, in Parsha Ki Davo, we had a certain script and a certain appointed time for us to go up and bring our first fruits, and then go up and bring our third year tithe. And after we completed the third year tithe cycle, a third in the script we were supposed to speak whenever we went to the mountains of Israel for the first time. These things are this is ya'ad. This is the idea of being responding in testimony form to what he has done, actually flowing with his words, using his language, his words. And so every time you see the word feast in your English Bible, know that the Holy One is talking about something much bigger than a potluck dinner or even a luscious banquet. He has instead in mind a prearranged divine appointment, a time at which he plans to meet with you. He plans to have you come forth and speak out of the Spirit, not just out of the flesh. Speak out of the Spirit and cry out and connect with his plan and get back in tune with his rhythms and his timing and his sequence and his agenda to take place. All right. The second key phrase that the Holy One uses to describe these things is I think it says in English, solemn assembly or sacred assembly. Wow, English does some strange things to the beautiful original Hebrew language. In Hebrew, it's mikra kadesh, a rehearsal of holiness, a rehearsal of the flowing with the energy of heaven. It's heaven coming to earth and becoming words of heaven being spoken upon the earth. That's what Mikra Kadesh means, not some sort of sacred assembly, which men do to try to make themselves feel holy or get some sort of contact. No, it's the Holy One instigating and calling and bringing forth and then putting the words in our mouth that will be said. Mikra means rehearsal or speaking out loud, and Kadesh means the energy, the passion, the holiness of God. Okay, so with that being said, all the Moedim, not just Yom Teruah, which is coming up this coming week, all of these Moedim are divine dramas, pre-scripted dramas that the whole Creator of the universe has been the script writer of. He is the writer, he's the producer, he is the director, he's the stage manager, he is the main character in all these events, not men. Not Jews, but we are called to a specific role to serve as a testimonial to the earth. These things must happen every year, no matter what else goes on. These testimonies, these divine releases of energy and words must come forth to give the story, to keep the story alive, generation to generation. The holy manager, who is the Holy One himself, ordains certain stage props like the shofar, in this regard, and scripts the themes of the dialogue that we will speak and determines the substance and the sequences of the acts of the play. He tells us what we're supposed to do, when we're supposed to do it, and he leads us in the direction. He is our prompter and everything else in this process. And if he's not, then you're just having a holiday like the Western world or the other cultures of the world do. This is not a holiday. This is a time to declare the things the Holy One has spoken in heaven, in earth, on earth, out of our human mouths. All right. So we are looking at part of an ultimate passion play. If you add up all the Moedim, all the divine festivals, feast as it says in the Western culture's King James Version, if you add up all those things, what you get is a great passion play. From beginning to end, it is the story of redemption. It is the story of restoration that the Holy One desires to play. And it is the sequence, the time areas, the mileposts that tell you where he is on that plan at the time. Each one will have its own script, its own message. A multi-act drama, as it were, of the Creator of the universe. He wrote it for his people, the B'nai Israel, to act out with others as they wish to join, but by themselves if no one joins, in sequence and at appointed time, in the course of the Torah cycle, in the course of the Moedim cycle, in the course of the agricultural cycle at all times, as he specifies, when he specifies. Yom Teruah, of course, the first day of the 7th month of the biblical year, which is just around the corner. And he does these things to reveal to the nations, to the people, and all their generations, and to all their ethnic ideas. He seeks to reveal his plan, his redemptive plan for the creation and for the mankind as a species, bloodline by bloodline, he does this to reveal that. This is his sequence. If we forget, if we don't do Yom Teruah, or we don't do Yom Kippur, if we don't do Sukkot, if we don't do Passover, if we choose some other holidays that just suit our theology better, and we just don't follow the instructions the Holy One gave us, then we aren't telling the story. We aren't telling the story the way he wants it told. We aren't telling the story with the pageantry and the majesty that he desires to be told. We are supposed to be his supporting cast in this great testimony to the world. Our job is simple. Just rehearse the lines the Holy One has written and practice the choreography he has designed and use the props he tells us to use. The goal is for us to get familiar with and catch and flow in the Holy One's vision so that we can communicate that vision effectively to the world. All right. The pieces of the puzzle that we put together in order to make a good testimony start with the Holy One's instructions in Torah. And they should never, ever lose the touch with those instructions. What he says to do in Torah is what we're supposed to do on Yom Teruah. Now, there are other things that we can perhaps add to supplement, to augment, but they must relate to, they must augment the things that are spoken in the Torah. So we have certain things that the traditions of the Jewish people have added to explain their elder brother means, desires. If they become something more important than that, if they supplant the instructions given in the Torah, then they are a problem in themselves. But they don't have to be. The traditions of the Jewish people should instead have the inspiration, the breath of the Holy One on them to bring about something that will tell the world the story in a better, more clear way. Okay, so now we have these different ways, and we have Messiah and his actions and the seasons in which he interacted with the world, as referred to in what the Western world calls the Gospels, to help us explain what will happen on these different days. You notice the Gospel writers were very clear to tell you about this special feast or that special feast or divine appointment. And he always wanted to let us know when it was Passover and when it was Pentecost and when it was Feast of Tabernacles. You see it's repeated over and over again. Messiah followed the schedule. He knows we must follow the schedule as well. When he leads us, we will follow the schedule the way he does. The first thing that the Torah actually tells us, the first part of the script he actually gives us for Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets, is that it is to be Shabbaton. It is to be a Sabbath. This is number one. Job one is to step aside from normal activities, to let our agendas be interrupted in order that we might instead tune ourselves back to the divine tone, the pure tone of heaven, and to the presence and the face and the majesty and the beauty of the Holy One himself, rather than think about what we need to get done on this earth, what we're upset about, what we're angry about, what we would rather be doing. No, this is about Shabbaton, about learning to take into ourselves the call up into the heavenly realm to see who he is and stop the stuff down here that keeps distracting us from doing it. Shabbaton, the day of rest, not just about physical rest. We can do that anytime. Shabbaton means to actually take in the holiness of God and bask in it and begin to absorb it and begin to emanate it from ourselves. And that requires more than just a few minutes of taking a deep breath. This is about completely refocusing our lives. Shabbaton. So that's job one. He says that we are to unplug, basically, from anxiety, from performance requirements the world puts on us or that we put on ourselves, from even eschatology. Walk away from theology. Walk away and just communicate. Focus solely on him. Make it relational, not religious. Okay? So we walk away from all the dramas of life. We walk away from all the jobs and tasks, the burdens that have been put on us by men. We find a place to seek stillness, to seek his presence, to enter into the courts of heaven where the thrones are seated and where the lightnings and the thunderings come forth, and we receive a clear mind, a cleansed palate, and we are able to recalculate. All right. So if we get that first piece of the puzzle, Shabbaton, we'll be introduced hopefully to another piece or two of the puzzle. Job 2, the second thing he tells us to do, is Zikaron. We are to activate our memory. Zikaron means commemoration or remember, but in Hebrew, zikaron means so much more than just bring to the forefront of your mind and think about for a minute. It means to actively reconnect with, to make it feel like you're living it, reliving it, and you're doing it in real time, even though it's something that's been not necessarily you're directly connected with. Zikaron, to make a commemoration. It comes from the Hebrew word zakar, which means to call something to the forefront of your mind, but not just do that, also act on it, reenact it, or pre-enact it, as the case may be, to connect heaven with earth. So step one is to take authority of your own mind, will, and emotions. To direct your attention away from the things that are on your worldly agenda and to focus only on the agenda of the King. His agenda is what matters. To basically, as I call it, stop the bleeding, because what most of us are doing at all times is bleeding toxicity into the world. We are taking in the burdens of life, of work, of responsibility to cultural norms and expectations, or the expectations of other people in our lives. We're just bleeding energy. We're bleeding life. Just stop the bleeding. This is zikaron. Reconnect with your life force, the wellspring from which life flows. Step two is surrendering to the Holy One, your whole mind, will, and emotions, all that you are, to let Him fill the vacated space with something, His thoughts, with His emotions, with His agenda, with His focuses, with His words. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what zikaron will mean. Step three, then, beyond step 1 and 2, stopping the bleeding and allowing Him to displace the things of our emotions and our attentions and our agendas with His. Step 3 is embracing and reprogramming our brain and our emotions and our flesh around the center point of what the Holy One has imparted or directed us and leads us to do. So, to applying that, we think about the garden. The Holy One meets with us, and suddenly fig leaves don't seem to be so valuable to us anymore. The things we cover ourselves with, the way we sort of present ourselves to the world as being okay, now all that stuff doesn't matter. I gave those examples. Mount Moriah, the thing that we think is valuable in life, like Abraham was called to take Yitzhak, his son, his beloved, his only son, at that stage, up into the mountain. And the Holy One says, I'm not going to take him from you, but you may have to think I am. You may have to understand that I am calling you to value me, prioritize me above all things of this earth, including this young man that you love so much. Well, I could go on about this. It is the cry of the Spirit within us, Abba, Father. We don't just come to Him as God. We don't just come to Him as some sort of a deity out there who we don't know why He thinks about us or what. We come because the Spirit, the Ruach within us, now cries out. This shofar sound that we make, this cry, this zikaron is, Abba, Father. We're the prodigal, and we're returning home. All right. The shofar tradition is developed. It is actually never mentioned in the instructions about the Torah. It's part of the traditions. The shofar is developed, though, because what it means when you blow the shofar, you don't think about what your mind, your thoughts, or emotions. You just release from the innermost being the very deep breath. And it's spirit to spirit, as opposed to trying to have someone in the musical field figure out what note that was or what. No, this is spirit to spirit. And that's why the shofar has been substituted, or actually not substituted, just given to enhance the vision of the cry that it comes from the heart on Yom Teruah. Okay. Now, begone to other of the jobs. The jobs that we were to do, we are to Teruah. We are to come forth and have this exchange of breath, draw deep into us, and then cry out with everything that we are to the Holy One as we appear before Him, as we let Him take us underneath His rod, the rod of inspection, like a shepherd would a sheep or a goat, and say, this is where you are, my child. This is where you are right now, and this is not where I called you to be. And what does he? Let him do what he needs to do. Let him touch and heal what he needs to heal. Let him discipline what he needs to discipline. It is not about eternal salvation, and that's why Yeshua did not come to do away with this. This is about learning how to become back in discipline with the Holy One. Discipleship is about discipline. The words come, disciple comes from discipline. All right. So we are to proclaim, declare, and testify publicly about what's going on. There is confession involved. There is declaration involved. There is recitation involved. Well, this is the idea we're supposed to touch the gates of our soul. Let heaven touch those gates and change it. Job 5 is we are to refuse to do ordinary work. I know that our minds tell us that our work is so important. What we need to get done is so critical that, we can't take time for this. It's just an imposition that the Holy One would tell us that we need to stop whatever it is we're doing that we think is so important, maybe that we've committed to, and do what He tells us to do instead. That is offensive to the human mind, unless you are in covenant with the Creator of the universe, and unless you have once tasted the beauty of His face and His presence, and of walking the purity and the wonder of walking in His will, in His ways. Once you have tasted the joy and the delight of that, you realize maybe I'm thinking things are important that aren't as important as I thought they were. Maybe if I just get in touch with Him, we'll be able to do what really needs to be done, and do it in record time without all the stress and the trials that go with it. What about that? So we are to refuse to do ordinary work. That is one of the ways of focusing upon the Holy One and His plan. The next job, the description that we have for Yom Teruah is karavtim. We are to draw close. We are to wherever we are in our relationship with the Holy One. And we may think we're really up there, really close, but we can always get closer. There's always something separating us. So we draw close. This is about karavtim in Hebrew. These are the words. Draw near. Come close to me. Come closer and closer and closer. And Psalm 32, it says, do not be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding, which have to be harnessed with a bit and a bridle, or else they will not come near you. Don't be like that to the Holy One. I got too much to do. I don't want to. No, don't let Him have to pull you with a bit and a bridle into His presence. Joyfully come. Rejoice. It is the most wonderful thing in the world to be in His presence. Psalm 65, verse 4. Blessed is the man you choose and cause to approach and draw near you, in order that He may dwell in your courts and be satisfied with the goodness of your house, of your holy temple. In Hebrews 10:22, it says, now let us draw near. Let us karav. Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of emunah. In James, Yaakov, in his epistle says, draw near, karav, to God. And He will karav. He will draw near to us, to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. That's the message of Yom Teruah. The seventh, the next thing, the final thing that he's going to mention as far as our job assignment, our script, is in Hebrew, Isha la'Adonai. Isha la'Adonai. Isha la'Adonai. English King James Version translates that interestingly. It says an offering made by fire. Strangely enough, the word offering is not in there at all. And the fire can be questionable because ish is also related to some other word. Isha. Isha is a bride, right? Is a wife. We are to come as a surrendered bride people, as a surrendered bride individual to the Holy One, to be our husband. We are not to come as a religion seeking to appease it's God. We're come as a bride, as a wife, to be surrendered to the will, the ways of the Holy One, our King, our husband, our God. Okay, this is the message of Yom Teruah. I will not go deeper into the traditions or the discussions. I'll let you sort that out for yourself. But what I want you to do is understand that whatever you may have thought about Rosh Hashanah or Yom Teruah before, reconsider, rethink. This is part of the redemptive and restorative plan of the Creator of the universe. This is not going away. It has not gone away. It will not go away. This is a lasting sign of the relationship between God and humanity and what he desires to have that relationship look like and be, and how he desires to fix everything when it's not. Thank you very much for your time. Blessings. And I would say, maybe the first to say it to you, Lashana Tova Tiketevu. May your name be inscribed by the Holy One for a good and fruitful year. Shabbat Shalom.